The second for the third sub-theme, and the last for the conference is a French guy. He will talk about the opportunities of Philippine natural textiles in the European Union. He graduated in Paris in international law and trade, and during his entire career since 1986, he has always focused on high-end apparels made of 100% natural fibers. He is sourcing and coordinating the production of garments using the rich natural resources and or experiences of various countries where he used to work and live. He has a long-standing experience as the Swiss Import Promotion Program expert in fashion and the textile sector. This lecture has also been pre-recorded. It's sort of like a question and answer thing. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from SIPO, Mr. Denis Gouttenoire.
My name is Denis Gouttenoire. I'm French, and like you, I am a professional in the fashion and textile industry. For nearly 30 years now, I've been carrying out international trading operations on fashion, clothing, and accessory, mostly made of natural fibers. I've been dealing with silk in China, silk and linen in China, with cashmere in Mongolia, with alpaca in Peru, and Pima cotton also in Peru, all countries I've been living. All this was for my European clients, mostly high-end and luxury brands. I also collaborate with a Swiss governmental organization called SIPO, Swiss Import Promotion Program. And it is in this framework of the SIPO that I recently carried out a survey on Filipino natural fibers. And this survey was mostly meant to listen to European buyers about the presence of these fibers and natural fibers products from Philippines origin on the European market, in the clothing and fashion accessories. So evaluate the presence of this product, also assess the perception of the European buyers about the Philippines, and finally to reflect also on the acceleration caused by the pandemic of these deep-rooted trends that, as you know, are reshaping the international fashion scene. I'm talking, of course, about sustainability and all these ethical approaches, both social and environmental, which are so important today. So it is around these three topics: presence of Filipinos natural fibers product in Europe, perception of the buyers, of the European buyers about the Philippines, and sustainability issue that we will discuss today. Our main objective is to highlight the key elements that could facilitate the access to European market of Philippines products, Philippine fashion products made of natural fibers. I think it's important to mention that these 4 natural fibers that the survey was covering are abaca, banana, piña, pineapple, and silk. Okay. Of course, the opinion presented in that presentation are my own and do not commit SIPO. Okay, this is my introductions. I give the words to PTRI if they want to add something before we really start the round of questions and answers.
Hi, good afternoon, Dennis, and thank you for that. It's a comprehensive introduction of what you're doing and the scope by which you have been exposed to Philippine textiles. So thank you for those information. Okay, so let me ask you then, what is the overall situation right now of the textile and garment, primarily on the production, the trade, and the innovation on a worldwide scenario?
Okay. So as you know very well, of course, the events of the last 12 months have strongly impacted the international fashion and textile trade at various levels. Contraction of demand, acceleration of online purchase, accumulation of unsold stock, which led to bankruptcies of many fashion-related companies in Europe, but in many other countries around the world. But what is for me of particular interest today is the accelerating effect that this crisis has had on certain trends that were already strong before the pandemic, but have become absolutely crucial today for an ever-increasing number of international textile and clothing buyers. Indeed, today, working with suppliers offering sustainable production methods and an ethical approach in both environmental and social fields have become priority criteria for a growing number of international buyers. The very well-known fairs, like for example, Premier Visions, have not been mistaken on that trends. And they have recently set up, including in their virtual version of Premier Vision show in 2020, and also again, they will do it in their session that will start in February 21. They have opened a space that they call the Smart Creation Area, which illustrates the acceleration of these sustainable and ethical trends. This Smart Creation Area is gathering companies which are leading companies, textile company, fashions company, in this sustainability, who goes really strongly in this sustainability direction. So it is really important for any supplier today to keep this in mind, and also to know that this ethical and sustainable attitude must be translated into actions, into fact, and not just into words. So I really want to conclude this answer to your question by saying that this is not an exercise in rhetoric, this is not dialectics, it is a deeply practical day-to-day commitment. What is my answer to your question, first question?
Very interesting indeed. So this very challenging hour, as they say, in the textile scene really has drastically changed the landscape, but nevertheless offers opportunities, as you said. So I'm just curious about SIPO, for example. How do you normally package or promote naturally and environment-friendly products, such as, for example, our Philippine natural textiles, for export to be able to penetrate at least the European market?
All right. Thank you for asking this. So first of all, I think it is important to understand that SIPO action is not carried out directly in relation to the companies, to the exporter, to the manufacturers. Even though we are, of course, in close contact with garments exporters, because it is absolutely fundamental for us to know this ecosystem of manufacturers. In order to develop, to implement useful activities, we have to know the industrial base. We mainly collaborate with local business support organization, what we call BSO, okay? Our goal really is to facilitate the market access to the company through our collaboration with the BSO. SIPO focuses primarily on what we call the last mile. That means last mile is really the final approach, where the suppliers comes into direct contact with the buyer. We support and we promote, for example, fairs participation, selling mission, eventually B2B meetings. All this being situated in the last mile. of course, to get to that point, to be able to put in contact in a positive way the supplier and the buyers, we implement some capacity building activities which are set up together with our BSO, together with the help of local support teams we may have in some countries, and of course with the support of European experts, my friends, and mostly European expert because our privileged area of activity is European market. So this is basically how SIPO is working and involving different stakeholders in our activity, whose main objective, as I say, is to facilitate access market, whatever it is for textile and fashion products made of natural fibers or not. This is the process we follow.
Very well. So if, for example, I am I'm a textile producer here in the Philippines, what would normally be the specifications and the properties of a textile material that are imperative, that would have been declared, for example, so that I could penetrate, or at least I could at least be absorbed by a European market?
All right. In this case, we have to make a distinction, as you say, between the property of the materials and the specification. For the properties of the materials, and when we say materials, let's be clear, we talk about yarns and fabric mostly. So as far as these properties are concerned, I strongly believe that we must use our common sense and bear in mind the quality criteria in force in our profession. That means things which are very common for us to discuss on a daily basis, like for fabric or for yarn, the tensile strength, the color fastness, the resistance to peeling, the dyeability, the unfeel, etc. of the fabric. All these parameters must reach a reasonable value, a reasonable level to enable to offer a buyer a fabric with all the quality guarantees he's entitled to expect. So we stick to the common sense. We have to offer fabrics to buyers which are qualitative. Whatever they are in natural fiber or not, quality is really a fundamental criteria, and the property of the material must be up to the standard of the industry. That means if we talk about natural fibers, it may have some consequences. For example, in the case of maybe abaca, maybe banana, maybe pineapple fibers, it may be essential to consider developing blended yarns rather than trying to develop 100% natural fibers, 100% piña, 100% abaca. Blends, the combination of various materials in the same yarns, allows to compensate for the weakness of the main material. Okay, you know this very well, better than me. And by using blends, you can achieve a final balance that is not only technically, but also aesthetically and consequently commercially viable. So I think this blend option is important to consider. Now, if we talk about specification of the fabric, this is for me something different. I will personally translate a specification as aesthetic requirements. Okay, we are here on the design area. The yarn, the fabrics must be created, must be elaborated and developed with always with the expectation of the target buyers in mind at all times. Okay. And this is where the role of the designer becomes fundamental. Okay. It is really up to them, up to the designer, to work upstream from the very beginning of the project in close collaboration with all the stakeholders, the technical teams, with the research center like you, with the spinners, with the weaver, with the knitters, designers have to collaborate with all of you to design yarns and fabrics that are aesthetically and commercially in line with the expectation of the target market segment.
Yeah.
For me, and I would like to conclude on this because I think it's really fundamental and we sometimes forget this, the quality of the design. What is the quality of a design? For a buyer, for a European buyer, the quality of a design lies in its adequacy to the expectation of the targeted market.
Yeah.
Okay, design is really central. It has to be fitted for your
Responsive.
target, for your target.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. So the limitation now of, the limitation of physical mobility and at present has not allowed us to be moving too far, Dennis. So could you just bring us to the window of the European Union? Could you tell us who the players are, the common players are right now of this niche market, if it still is a niche market, at least in the European Union?
Okay. As we are talking about, especially about natural fibers, it might seem at first sight that European brands openly claiming to be sustainable, and you have a lot of companies today and every day more, which claim to be sustainable. They are actually proposing sustainable product. It may seem at first sight to be a privileged commercial target for emerging fibers. When I say emerging fibers, I'm talking about fibers like abaca and banana, which are not yet very well known by the general public and sometimes even by the buyers themselves. So we can think that this sustainable company could be your priority target. I'm not convinced of that. For one reason, many of these companies are really small and they can be a kind of niche market. And I think this niche market, even if they can be in some cases interested, are limited in volume. And I would be really tempted to say that today, all market players, all fashion and brands companies, all brands in European market are likely to be interested in emerging natural fibers. So we should not, or I believe the Filipino supplier should not limit their scope of target clients to sustainable company. If the fiber is really in line with buyer expectation, all market player could be interested. But the selection of buyers will mainly be based on price. Indeed, as you know well, it is clear that natural fibers, which are manufactured according to sustainable production process and in respect of a certain ethical consideration, are generally more expensive than their unsustainable competitors. And this higher price of the fibers will make them appeal to a particular market segment. But the good news is that the changes in the consumption patterns of final consumer in Europe in particular also accelerated during the crisis we have been through. And today, you have more and more of the final customers who want to consume less and consume better. It means they are ready to pay a little more for a sustainable, traceable, and qualitative product. I agree, admittedly, there is still a long way to go, okay? But this trend is there, strong and deep. One thing, of course, that we should never forget is that this end consumer, they don't just want natural fibers, okay? not only natural fiber. They want also, and I come back to this point, they want also design that suits their tastes. They want design that fit their expectation. Made of natural fiber or not, the design must be integrated in the product right from the beginning.
Yeah, particularly because we also know the renewed vigor, for example, of Southeast Asia. Like for example, the textile economies of Vietnam has been very interesting recently. Of course, those of our neighbors, Thailand, Malaysia, the common players, and of course the Philippines. But what do you think makes Southeast Asian market or the Southeast Asian production appealing to the European Union?
All right. So in this case, for me to make a long story short, I would like to mention just two criteria that I think are important. First criteria is, because we are talking of natural fibers again, this is our focus point. I will insist on the very rich natural biodiversity of Southeast Asia in general, and the Philippines in particular. For me, this is one very important point. And second, there is in Philippines and also in other countries in Southeast Asia, a very rich textile tradition. Okay, so these two elements are appealing for European buyers. But tradition, for example, is a great asset. Okay. But nevertheless, it is dangerous. Why it is dangerous? Because there is always the risk of getting stuck in tradition, okay? I'm really convinced that a living traditions must evolve and open up to the world. Otherwise, it ends up as a dead tradition, and it ends up in a museum, you know? Tradition is something which lives and which evolves.
Have to evolve.
If the aim is to gain access to export market, to European market, if the objective is to arouse the curiosity and the interest of the international buyers, then tradition must, in my opinion, be seen just as a source of inspiration, aesthetic and technical, and always be enriched by new experience, by new proposal, aiming to adapt the ancestral techniques to the expectation again of international fashion brand. This is the role of designer. So you have in Southeast Asia a large biodiversity, a very old tradition, but this has to be how can I say, cooked in a modern way by the designers.
Yeah, very interesting. A very interesting point on that, because it leads me to really going deeper on that part. Where do you think that cultural value of the textile, for example, the origin, the iconographies, the techniques, do they really bring value, real value, especially to the European market for the textiles that are coming from our end?
All right. It would be too vast and beyond my competence to deal here with all Asian economies. So I will, of course, focus mainly on what I learned about the Philippines and about the collected opinions of the fashion and textile expert and professional I've been interviewing from the 7 European countries that were part of the survey I recently did. So I will limit myself to answer your question. Quote the main clues highlighted in this study. As say, the study concerned 4 natural fibers, abaca, banana, piña, and silk. And objective was to identify options in order to facilitate access to the European market for Filipino textile company. The first two important things the study highlighted is a lack of presence and the lack of perception. I will explain myself. We realize that the presence of the four fibers on the European market today is either non-existent or extremely low, okay? I have analyzed the custom statistics of different European countries. I also survey the offer of many European brands, including 77 company brands, European brands, claiming to be sustainable. And this analysis demonstrate that the presence of this four fiber is really low. Philippine is not selling almost silk to Europe. This is for the animal fibers, and for the free plant-based fibers, only pineapple fibers, because there is a registered brand called Pinatex, is selling in Europe, but it is still quite marginal and it's not really widespread. Banana and abaca are not present at all in the fashion and textile industry. They may be present in other sectors that I do not cover, like maybe home textile, maybe in industrial application, but as far as fashion clothes and fashion accessory are concerned, the presence of this four fiber is really low. So this is one first point which the survey demonstrated. The second point, which I believe is important to understand, is the perception of the buyers of the Philippines. There is a deficit of perception because all the buyers contacted, all the buyers I talk with, agreed in saying that on the international fashion market, they perceive the Philippines as a very marginal players. So these 2 points, deficit of perception and deficit of presence, could be explained by many factors, you know, economic, political, social, historical. These factors could explain this situation. But for me, and after this survey, I will consider only 3 factors that seem fundamental to me and to the European colleague I talk with. And these 3 factors that could explain why there is a deficit of presence and deficit of perception are linked to these 3 points: yarns, designers, and narrative. This is 3 points I'd like to clarify. First things, yarns. We estimate, when I say we, it's the professional of the fashion industry, European professional of the fashion industry I interview and I discuss, I exchange with. We estimate that the Philippine supply of trendy industrial quality yarn is not sufficient, is insufficient. For the 3 vegetable fibers, abaca, banana, and piña, there is really a striking absence of yarns and therefore of fabrics truly adapted to the demand of the export market. Of course, there are traditional yarns, okay, and fabrics, but most of them are unsuited to the expectation of international customers. These traditional yarns and fabrics, be adequate for some niche market, but many of this niche market have far too limited commercial interest. So for us, there is a lack of yarns. Second, for the silk, the situation is different. In the exchange and the discussion I had, again, with professionals of the silk sector in Europe, 2 arguments often came up from the discussion. First, it seems extremely difficult and uncertain for a new supplier country to gain a foothold in the very competitive traditional silk market, because it is controlled by few heavyweight players in the sectors. First and foremost, of course, you have China, but also Italians and French for printed silk. And the ticket, the entry ticket to gain a foothold in this market is very expensive, very complicated. So it's difficult to enter. If you are like Philippines, a country which is not yet producing high level of classical silk. Second remark that my interlocutor did is they suggested that maybe it's just a suggestion, you know, that the organic silk sector could perhaps be an option for the Philippines, because this market is still in its infancy, and everything has to be built, especially international standard for organic silk, which are not yet fixed and not yet recognized internationally. But again, whatever the type of fiber we consider, of vegetal, of animal origins, the buyer's response to the question, what will be your criteria for selecting a new fiber, remained always the same. They all point out the quality and property of the yarns. So again, yarns are at the heart of the market access strategy. They are the focus point, you know. So this is one thing. Any country wishing to access European market need to propose good range of yarns, but not just any yarns. This is the second important point, which can explain why you have no presence and very few recognitions and perception about Philippines by the European buyer for the moment. Designers. Yarns and fabric must be adapted to fit buyer expectation. I insist and again on this. From the initial design phase, the yarn must integrate the criteria linked to application, to the aesthetic preference of the export customer. This integration work is the responsibility of the designer. So we believe involving well-trained professional designer from the initial stage of development of a fashion items, and this initial stage concerns the creation of the yarns, you know, is of strategic importance. We have seen the importance of yarns. We have seen the importance to involve the designers. There is a third point, which is more at marketing level of communication, on communication level, which I call narrative. Narrative is nothing else than a good story, you know. A fashion article is not a technical product. We are not selling metallic plates. We are not selling technical woods. We are selling fashion. Fashion, designers and buyers can be very sensitive to the dream, to the imagination, to the irrationality that surrounds the fashion products, you know. They can be sensitive to those who shape the product, to the place of origin of the product, to the history of the product, its roots, and today, of course, to the product natural and sustainable dimension. All these elements, which are not technical, which are not really rational, all these elements are the components of the narrative, of the story that magnifies, that modifies positively, of course, the perception that the international customers and buyer may have of the product. Intangible elements like an attractive narrative can have an astonishing power of motivation and persuasion over international buyers. I will give you a few examples. Many success stories in the fashion industry are based on great narratives. You know, for fashion, for a buyer, it's really attractive. Pashmina in Indian Kashmir, mohair in South Africa, alpaca and vicuña in Peru, Chinese silk, Mongolian cashmere, printed silk from Italy and France, New Zealand merino wool, sea island cottons, etc. All these products, natural products, fashion products, are sold and based on a very strong narrative, a good story. You know?
Yeah.
So we believe, the professional of the fashion companies in Europe, and I also believe strongly, that the creation of an attractive and intelligent narrative at the country level can provide a powerful commercial and marketing arguments for a country and its industries to facilitate its access to the export market. I will do a short parenthesis. I lived many years in Peru, and I was selling alpaca and vicuña product, which is a fiber coming from a special animal which live in the highlands of Peru. The Peruvian, in the turn of the 2000, beginning of 2000s, 20 years ago, they started to decide to build a nice narrative around this alpaca product. This product they have in the highlands of Peru with the high mountains, beautiful landscape, etc. They build the narrative to promote the fibers, and it works. It works. It has been implemented first by the BSO, by the government, and it's really now in the mind of the buyers. Alpaca is linked to a very nice narrative. So it is in fact a matter of changing the perception that international buyers they have of the country fashion and textile sector. The creation and the implementation of an intelligent, true, and must be true. We cannot lie in a narrative, okay? We can be creative, but we cannot say things which do not exist in reality. Effective contemporary narrative is a task that must be initiated at a meta level, okay? When I say meta level, in other words, it is first of all a political will and decision that will then be supported by communication professionals, communication agencies, and then it will be supported by all the institutional and private players in the sector, okay? So to conclude this a bit long answer, my professional colleague and I believe, perhaps naively, but we have been thinking about, that the unique geographical configuration of the Philippines, with this incredible archipelago you have of more than 7,000 islands, this exceptional biodiversity of the Philippines, your rich textile traditions, and of course, before all, the creativity of all the talented people in this textile and garment sector of the Philippines, all these are already a very promising elements that could enable to build for the country a narrative in line with the international concern of our time. That means sustainability and respect for environmental and social standards. So these three elements, yarns, designers involved, build a narrative, for me, are really critical elements to facilitate access to market.
Very interesting, very comprehensive on that. But yeah, it really puts us into perspective about the interventions that we have in the industry. And you did mention quite already in passing the interesting feature as well, how and why the Philippines, for example, could possibly champion and could possibly be able to realize the bid towards a really robust creative economy. Now, Dennis, time has not been kind to us, but I'm going to my last question now, and this is particularly on the sustainability. You did mention repeatedly about ethical standards and sustainability concepts. So at the moment, the textile circularity is quite a new thing, at least in the Philippines. is this more of a marketing tool than a real operational system in our context? And what are the convincing aspects, for example, that could spark a paradigm shift from this linear traditional setup to a circular one?
Okay, the circular business model offers, I believe, I'm convinced, a particularly motivating and fruitful framework for reflection for all entrepreneurs who are genuinely interested in reshaping their production methods in order to limit waste and pollution, to integrate more and more recycled materials into the production process, and to promote traceability and etc. So I agree, some companies probably use the term of circularity for marketing purposes without really applying this business model to their production line. But the fact remains that circularity is a real operational tool, which, if it is properly applied, of course, can give a very concrete result. For me, circularity, sustainability, ethical approach, etc., are all concepts with very concrete practical implication. And the various international certifications show this very well. So as we said at the beginning of this interview, we believe that the sanitary crisis has seriously accelerated the spread of these trends among the world's fashion and textile players. The influence of this trend and the operational implementation of this trend will only increase in the years to come. So definitely all countries, including the Philippines, must be ready to face this challenge. And as I say, the free direction in which I believe a country like yours should really insist to go is develop new yarns fitted for buyer expectations, involve the designer right from the beginning in the process of developing yarn, of course, and fabrics in a sustainable way, respecting the ethical standards, social and environmental. And third, to help and to push this to promote these fibers, building a powerful and modern narrative. Then the question of sustainable production process, circularity business model should be integrated, embedded in this effort. And this all together will definitely increase your chance greatly to access the European market, which are absolutely ready if there is a real good proposal, adapted proposal to accept new fibers coming from the Philippines with very nice narrative and good creative proposal.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. And we are doing and we are working just towards that. So with that, we end. Dennis, thank you very much. It has been a very, a very nice exchange. And it has been a pleasure to have you in this conference. Maybe we'll have a longer time next time. Hopefully, we'll get in touch still. And the exchanges, your exposure to Philippine textiles has been very interesting as well. So I give you the last word. Maybe you have a parting word, and we will end it at that. So give you the floor.
First, I'm sorry to have taken a bit too much time, but I strongly believe, and my colleague in Europe strongly believe, that Philippines has a lot to show to the world in the field of natural fibers, and I'm sure some very nice product can be developed, and I'm sure that Philippines can gain access again to the fashion scene and convince European buyers to buy product based on abaca, banana, piña, and maybe organic silk. And I thank you all very much for your kind attention. And as I say in the beginning, if you have any questions or comments, you can send it to TELA and they will relate to me. Thank you again for your kind attention. and all the best to all the professionals here. Thank you. Bye-bye.